In 2025, the small coastal state of Colima holds a dark distinction. It is the most violent state in all of Mexico. For the third consecutive year, its homicide rate has soared far above the national average, reaching a staggering 101 murders per 100,000 residents in 2024. This wave of bloodshed is not random. It is the direct result of a brutal war between powerful criminal organizations. The epicenter of this conflict is the strategic port of Manzanillo, one of Mexico's most important commercial gateways on the Pacific coast. Control of this port means control over a lucrative pipeline for trafficking narcotics out of the country and, more critically, importing the precursor chemicals needed to manufacture synthetic drugs like fentanyl. The value of Manzanillo cannot be overstated for these criminal enterprises. It serves as the primary entry point for vast quantities of chemicals arriving from Asia, which form the building blocks of the synthetic drug trade that has become immensely profitable. Whoever controls the port's docks, warehouses, and customs officials effectively holds the keys to a multi-billion-dollar industry. This immense prize has turned Colima into a fiercely contested battleground. The violence has spilled from the port into the streets of cities like Manzanillo, Villa de Alvarez, and the state capital, Colima City, where public shootouts and targeted assassinations have become a terrifyingly common feature of daily life, turning communities into war zones. The main belligerents in this deadly turf war are some of Mexico's most formidable cartels. On one side is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJN, an aggressive and expansionist organization known for its military-style tactics and extreme violence. The CJN, based in the neighboring state of Jalisco, considers Colima to be a natural extension of its territory and essential for its global drug operations. Opposing them is the storied Sinaloa Cartel, a long-established criminal federation now weakened by internal divisions. A third player, the Northeast Cartel, a brutal splinter group of the old Zetas, also vies for a piece of the action, adding another layer of complexity and violence to the already volatile mix. The conflict has had devastating consequences for the state's residents and its economy. The constant threat of violence has led to a climate of fear, disrupting everyday life and shuttering businesses. International perception has soured, with the US State Department issuing its highest Level 4 Do Not Travel advisory for Colima. The situation became so dire that in December 2024, Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines suspended all trips to Manzanillo, citing the extreme rates of murder and kidnapping. This decision highlights how the localized cartel war has international repercussions, isolating a state that once depended on tourism and trade, now known only for its chaos. The landscape of Colima's underworld is defined by fluid and treacherous alliances. For a time, a fragile peace was maintained by a partnership between the dominant CJN and a local group known as Los Mezcales. This armed wing acted as the CJNG's muscle in the state, enforcing its control over the port and local drug markets. However, this alliance was built on a foundation of convenience rather than loyalty, and it was destined to crumble under the immense pressure of the drug war. These local groups often have their own ambitions and resent taking orders from larger outside organizations, creating a constant potential for betrayal when circumstances change or a better offer comes along. A dramatic escalation in violence occurred in 2022 when Los Mezcales made a stunning move. They broke their long-standing alliance with the CJN and declared their allegiance to its chief rival, the Sinaloa Cartel. This betrayal instantly shattered the existing power structure in Colima and plunged the state into an unprecedented spiral of violence. The CJN, feeling the sting of this defection, launched a brutal offensive to reclaim its territory and punish its former partners. Los Mezcales, now backed by the resources of the Sinaloa Cartel, fought back fiercely. The result was a doubling of violence as the two sides battled block by block for control of the state. This shift demonstrates a key feature of modern cartel conflicts in Mexico: the importance of local gangs. These smaller regional groups can act as kingmakers, tipping the balance of power between the larger transnational cartels. By switching sides, Los Mezcales did more than just change their own fortunes. They transformed Colima into a primary front in the national war between the CJN and the Sinaloa Cartel. The fighting that ensued was personal and vicious, marked by public displays of violence intended to terrorize rivals and the civilian population alike. This strategic realignment ensured that Colima would remain a hotbed of conflict for years to come. The aftermath of this split remains palpable on the streets of Colima in 2025. The state is now carved up into territories controlled by warring factions, with invisible front lines that citizens must learn to navigate to survive. The conflict is no longer just about controlling the port. It has evolved into a bitter feud fueled by revenge. The CJN is determined to eradicate Los Mezcales as a warning to any other local groups that might consider betraying them, while Los Mezcales and their Sinaloa patrons are fighting for their very survival. This dynamic of betrayal and retribution has created a cycle of violence that seems to have no end. Just as the war in Colima was intensifying, the Sinaloa cartel began to fracture from within, creating even more instability. For years, the cartel was led by the legendary Ismael El Mayo Zambada, a co-founder alongside the now imprisoned Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. However, a deep rift emerged between Zambada's faction, known as Los Mayitos, and the faction led by El Chapo's sons, collectively known as Los Chapitos. This internal power struggle, which erupted into open warfare in September 2024, has severely weakened the once mighty criminal federation, leaving its territories, including its interests in Colima, vulnerable to attack. This internal conflict has had a direct and bloody impact on the ground. In December 2024, a high-profile Sinaloa cartel leader in Manzanillo, Jose Isabel, known as El Chabelo, was killed. The event was a shocking display of public violence. El Chabelo and his men reportedly stormed a clandestine cockfight, killing 2 people before being confronted by police in a fierce shootout that left him dead. This incident was not just a random act of violence, it was a symptom of the chaos gripping the Sinaloa organization. With the leadership in disarray, local commanders like El Chabelo were left exposed, and their deaths create power vacuums that rivals are quick to exploit. The internal war within the Sinaloa cartel has created a strategic opportunity for its main rival, the CJNG. According to a 2025 report from the US Drug Enforcement Administration, there is a grave risk of a new, terrifying alliance forming. The DEA warns that the CJN and the Los Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel may be negotiating a partnership. Their shared goal would be to eliminate their common enemy, the Los Mayitos faction led by El Mayo Zambada. Such an alliance would dramatically reshape the criminal landscape of Mexico, pooling the resources and firepower of 2 of the country's most powerful criminal organizations. If this alliance materializes, the consequences for Colima would be catastrophic. The combined forces of the CJN and Los Chapitos would likely launch a final, decisive offensive to crush the Mayitos-backed Los Mezcales and seize undisputed control of the Manzanillo port. This would not be a quiet takeover, but a full-scale war, leading to an even greater surge in violence. The potential for such a super cartel to emerge from the ashes of the Sinaloa split represents one of the most significant threats to Mexican security, and Colima would undoubtedly be one of its first and most brutal testing grounds. The escalating chaos in Colima presents a monumental challenge for the new administration of President Claudia Sheinbaum, who took office in October 2024. She inherited a nation plagued by fragmented cartels and shifting alliances, where violence has become more unpredictable and widespread than ever before. Colima serves as a microcosm of this national crisis. The state's security situation is not a simple battle between 2 rivals, but a complex web of betrayals, internal fractures, and potential new alliances that defies easy solutions. The government is no longer facing monolithic cartels, but a chaotic array of splinter groups and warring factions. The strategy of the previous administration, often described as hugs, not bullets, focused on addressing the social root causes of crime, but failed to contain the expansion and violence of groups like the CJN. The Sheinbaum government must now decide whether to continue this policy or adopt a more confrontational approach. In Colima, either choice carries immense risks. A hardline military crackdown could lead to an all-out war with heavily armed cartels, causing civilian casualties and human rights abuses. However, a continuation of the previous strategy may be seen as a green light for cartels to continue their bloody expansion without consequence. The potential Xinjiang-Los Chapitos alliance represents the government's most immediate and dangerous threat. This alliance would consolidate criminal power on an unprecedented scale, making the resulting entity even more difficult for the state to challenge. The new administration must find a way to prevent this partnership from solidifying, perhaps by exploiting lingering distrust between the two groups. The government's ability to gather intelligence and disrupt the command and control structures of these organizations will be critical. Failure to do so could result in the state losing control over strategic territories like Colima entirely. Ultimately, the future of Colima, and indeed Mexico, will depend on the new government's ability to adapt to this new era of cartel fragmentation and fluidity. The days of targeting a single kingpin to dismantle an organization are over. The challenge now is to manage a multi-front conflict against a constantly evolving enemy. For the people of Colima, who have endured years of terror, the hope is that the new administration can finally devise a strategy that restores peace. But as of 2025, with powerful forces converging on their state, peace seems a very distant prospect.